Okay, so we said on the first day a little bit about the nature of contractions. So the first thing we said is that one of the first things we said is that in contraction there's far less perception, which means far less feeling. There's far less feeling. In a contraction, there's far less feeling. When there's a block, you know, here is your skin and here it's ouch, and you hit here and it's like there's much less feeling.
So actually where there is a contraction, there's less feeling.
Yeah. Which is one aspect of perception. But also, what a contraction does is it reduces our perception, our view of reality. To the two poles of that contraction, the either or of that contraction. So a big one is me versus you, or me versus the others. And of course, me versus the others, that's like a kind of kill or be killed equation. It's survival, it's all about survival. Or I die or you die, it's battlefield stuff. And those are the two poles, the heaven and hell of that universe of the contraction. Me versus you. So everything else gets lost, including everything else that's in me and everything else that's in you. The qualities which are there, the freedom which is there, the peace which is there, the beauty which is there, the possibilities which are there, that's part of the freedom. So there's an incredible shrinkage. The world gets small. We don't see the birds in the trees, the blueness of the infinite sky, the fresh air. All of that becomes kitsch, blah blah duba. It's like a trauma tunnel. All of that is maze lo mishane, you know. We don't feel our bodies. We lose connection with love. We lose connection beyond the connection which is me versus you. So it's big shit. That's like standing in a bunker in the Sinai desert and you're facing an Egyptian soldier, and or you have to kill him or he's going to kill you. It's one or the other. That's the charge inside that, the survival of a contraction. So if this it feels, with a great intensity, great grandiosity even. Grandiosity is a characteristic of a contraction. It's like this bubble. And it feels so important.
The contraction.
Yes, this struggle to be on the right side of the coin. So when I say this, of course, immediately we think we all want to get free of these contractions. You know, they're making us stupid in our heads. They're making us limited in our feeling. It's building our reality in a way which is kind of tiny, right? So who would want a contraction? And I really mean it literally. Our thinking processes slow down. Our brains in survival start spritzing chemicals that numb our ability to take in information. So the most simple way to say what's happening when contractions take over the show is there is extreme stress. There's a lot of stress. It's very hard to relax. And one way we try and come to relaxation is we use the mind to try and understand it, to give order. so that we can relax, be free of this stress. So or we have to do something, or we have to understand something, or we need to get hold of the situation. It's because he said this, and then I said this, and it's because he has this, and it's because of my wound back there, and to try and get a grip on the stress, to find a solution. It's a natural thing to do. And in all of this attempt to solve it, what's happening is it's all incredibly personal. It's very egocentric. It's all about me. It's me. This is my contraction. This is when we were doing the healing bit already, you know. We say, I've got a contraction, but this is my contraction. This is my private, intimate contraction that I have to deal with, Because stress and survival sends us warmth into the I. I have to deal with this. I have to take care. I have to survive. I. Me. And this can be incredibly frustrating when we can't find any good reason at all why we're suffering this contraction. Nothing sticks. We've got a problem, we're in stress, we're in survival, but nothing that's happened really in our childhood or in our life justifies the horror, the sheer horror of this contraction. So you've got somebody, for example, who's I take the old favourite, the pain of rejection. Who's got a incredible pain around the pain of rejection. You know? She comes from a happy family, no divorce, no bereavement, no particular trauma. Everything's absolutely fine. In fact, it's such a perfect family that they're exemplary to the community. Yeah. But each time she gets a rejection, it's like ripping her in two. She goes into survival. She starts cutting herself because it's too much. I take an extreme case. You know, she starts self-hurting because she cannot contain this pain, and she goes to therapists. And therapists say, "What the fuck? This is craziness. She's insane. There's no good reason for this." Often the therapy reaffirms it. They start looking for the trauma, and each time she gives some, "Oh yeah, my mother kind of told me off when I was 3. Well, you know, that's not good enough to justify this, right? It's like, so she's left feeling even more kind of isolated and rejected, and rejected in insanity, and isolated in this suffering. The therapy in this case is actually making it worse in a way, because she has no good reason to suffer, or he. So this is where the whole area of family constellations and epigenetic trauma becomes extremely, a paradigm shift, a groundbreaking paradigm shift, and now the science is there to show its truth. So I will explain a little more about the epigenetics of trauma. But we're not only talking about trauma, we're talking about contractions, we're talking about states, we're talking about moods, about patterns. So when we talk about the epigenetics of trauma, we're talking about trauma that's been inherited from our predecessors, from our ancestors, through the mother or through the father, on the level of the genes, together with our bodies. Studies, one of the most groundbreaking studies on this was where they identified a stressor, a chemical tag, on the genes of a whole population of second-generation Holocaust survivors. The system, according to certain signals, is uniformly going into stress and survival according to certain impetuses. That across a whole population of Holocaust survivors that they sampled, this epigenetic tag, this stressor on the genes, was there with all of them, and with their parents. Before that, they'd only done it with rats in a laboratory, and what they found was, with the rats in the laboratory, that if you take a bunch of rats and you give it an electric shock every time it smells cherry blossom, yes, so with that rat, and this is totally to be predicted, when it smells cherry blossom, it goes into stress without the electric shock. You train it to go into stress with an electric shock associated with the smell of cherry blossom. But then they tested it on the children of the rat and the grandchildren and the great-grandchildren of the rat.
And he had it too.
And they were also going into total stress with cherry blossom. Not with roses, not with yasmin. Smell of cherry blossom, rats start to panic 3 generations down. Through the mother and the father. Paternal and maternal. Paternal and maternal, meaning also if the fathers were shocked. So it's through the sperm as well. It's really on the level of genes. So that was the original science that opened up so let's look at humans. And so the researchers have still going on in these times. They found PTSD is post-traumatic stress disorder, untreated, is passed on to the children, which means that the child is already coded as a baby to go into stress with a big bang, for example, if the PTSD is from Iraq, and an explosion. It's already what would be a big noise from one child, for a child who's the son of somebody who fought in Iraq and is traumatized by a big explosion, it's apocalyptic. They looked into populations of second generation slaves who are now free black Americans, found similar patterns. They also looked into the whole question, and this was in Tel Aviv University, of resilience. Because this is the open question, this is really the healing question. If this person who's carrying this tag, this grandchild, works through the trauma of her grandmother or of her great uncle or whoever, does it then get passed on to the child? And what they're seeing is that no, it doesn't get passed on. But something else does get passed on, and that's the resilience to that kind of environment. So rather than going into a total kind of panic attack and anxiety, in its worst case scenario, when the child hears a big bang, he recognizes the threat that could be there in the big bang, he knows it's okay, but he doesn't exclude the possibility that this could also mean death, but it doesn't set up the stress. He's cool with it.
How do they measure that?
I'm giving the example of resilience. This is still on the level of rats in Tel Aviv University,
Okay.
But they see that resilience is passed on. So that means when a cycle of trauma has been completed through the generations, or a contraction has been released, because the contractions move through too. Now I add that, that's not the science. It's not that they're left innocent and vulnerable and exposed like they were at the beginning. There is a change, there's a development, there's a learning. There's a learning in the form of resilience. And so one of the top scientists on this, what they said is, who would you rather take into battle? Somebody who's never been on a battlefield, who's somebody who's been to a battlefield and survived it? So that's how she describes the resilience. There is an intuitive knowing of how to deal, for example, with Holocaust. So it's not that you don't see the warning signs of a coming Third Reich. You see them, but it doesn't set the whole system into panic anymore. It's a much more calm awareness of threat, but without the threat being immediate now, and a really beautiful inner knowing. This is emerging in a child who never had that experience of what to do in this kind of situation. So when we look inside ourselves, it's possible to recognize that certain aspects of ourselves are works in process. Yes, they still need to be completed, the cycle of the contraction. And other aspects of ourselves, actually we're really, really cool dudes there. We know it, and we don't know how we know it, but we know how to deal with these situations, like a fire. We know what to do. This just comes, we know. It's not freaking us out at all, whereas other people could be at the stage where it's a total panic or totally innocent and in a shock. So that's the resilient factor. It's this inner kind of confidence, competence. So,
but it can be also behavioral learning. Like the rat child see his parents going to panic when.
no, they don't see their parents. And we're talking third and fourth generation.
Yeah, but the son see the panic of the father and
No.
etc.
I mean, it can also be behavioural. There is the whole environment and the conditioning, and it's reaffirmed by that. This is why it's so very, very strong. Because if you inherit, and I'm not going to say trauma, contraction, epigenetic tag each time. So let's just say trauma. If you inherit a trauma from your mother, through your mother's line, which she hasn't been able to work through, and her mother wasn't able to work through, and probably her mother wasn't able to work through. So you get your bit of this trauma, yes? All the behaviours of the mother and the way she brings you up and in the subtle, already in the womb, the things that are making her go into stress are reaffirming what's there to be reaffirmed. It's making it stronger. So what would be an impulse to go into stress, yes, when you see a man with a dark hood, when your mother goes into stress, is double the impulse to go into stress. That's reality. We go into stress when we see a man with a dark hood. And it's somatic. It's prenatal, it's before birth, even. Getting this chemistry of stress, the patterning of stress, but it's also genetic. And that it's behavioural doesn't cancel out the genetic. They found the tags.
But how can the genes know that the specific situation of a man with a dark hood? I mean, it's too specific for a gene to pass. It has to be some kind of learning.
Okay, so
of learning.
Some kind of process of reassociation. You're saying that you reassociate it with a man with a dark hood.
Yeah.
Or it could also be a woman with a dark hood, or this or that, but anything that reminds of that traumatic circumstance.
But you're assuming that the specific cannot be passed. You don't know that.
Can I give an example just to ponder on, because it's really not worth anything to give it as knowledge. It's something to uncover through your own working with a bit of this and that, which is in our personhoods, you know, because that's where you get the real insight, not telling. But if you look at the Israeli fear of dogs, the Israeli attitude to dogs, can you feel? And that's quite specific. Dogs, especially German Shepherds or Rottweilers. You say, of course, but this is exactly the point, because these children, what are we, 4 generations down since the Holocaust? And it's quite specific. That kind of dog, a dog like our dog, a German Shepherd dog, is creating a stress reaction. I see it especially in the religious children, and I see it affirmed and confirmed and passed on as a law. We are afraid of dogs, you are afraid of dogs. But also, you see a hell of a lot of fear in children, Israeli children, towards dogs. They never lived in Europe, they were never in Auschwitz, they never saw the Nazis. Take English children, put them with a German Shepherd. Fluffy puppy. So it's really, really worth looking into, because it does get very, very, very specific. I tell a story of because it helps show how it works, of a case which is told in relation to this. I tell a story and then ask the question, because maybe the story asks with the question.
Answers the question.
Asks the question.
Yes, exactly.
It also will ask and answer, whatever.
Yes, exactly.
So, Mark Wallin, he wrote this book, It Didn't Start With You, and it's a brilliant title, It Didn't Start With You. This person that you think you are didn't start with you. You came into this together with the body. This personality, these wounds, these pains. It goes long back. So he wrote this book, and one of the chief wake-up calls to him with the whole work, he was in family constellation before that, was he had a client who came from that happy family, perfect family, everything's perfect, enough money, great education, loving father, loving mother, caring and all of this. And at the age of 16, she started cutting herself, really violently, really, really, like, specific to the age, and this is one of the things, it's age specific, that's how specific it can be. So age 16, from being a normal child, happy child, she starts cutting her legs. And what she carved into the inner thigh of her leg was fat pig. Now she wasn't fat, nor was she a pig. really with a knife, fat pig. So this is an extreme case. She goes to psychologists and nobody can help her with this. Nobody's able to help her with this cutting problem. When she was 18, her parents told her that she was adopted. So that was a shock, and that actually it didn't help with the cutting. So, a lot of the classical therapy was saying, okay, so, it's the shock of being adopted, and maybe, it's already a bit fucked up to be adopted, so, she's angry.
Even though she didn't know about being adopted when she
No,
started.
yeah, exactly. So Mark Wallen was working with her. She was already 28, been cutting all of these years. And he's got this intuition for the language. And it's to the specifics of the languages, the sentences we hear in our head. And he really works with the sentences, which is why we're working with beliefs, bringing in Byron Katie. So he's saying, fat pig, fat pig, fat pig. What's this fat pig? What happened in your family? What happened in your adopted family? She wrote fat pig. So he says, what's this fat pig? What's fat pig? What is it? Why? Why those words? Tell me something about your adopted family.
Did she know it?
Yeah, but she never made the connection.
No, okay, but she knew.
So she said that she was adopted, and this is often the case with adoption, because her mother was raped at the age of 16. And she was born, she is the child of that rape. And in a flash he saw that her father's a rapist, right? The rapist in the situation, the abuser, and her mother is the abused. Remember, victim, perpetrator? So in that moment, he saw the whole enactment, the whole physical enactment, to try and bring it to oneness between the abuser and the abused. So she, the abuser, cuts herself in a sexual area with the insult, fat pig. And she's carving, but he was probably a fat pig, because she certainly wasn't fat, and always happened. Yeah, so she embodies both and tries to release it through wounding herself. So from this knowledge, from this position, he begins working with her. Putting herself in the position of her mother, putting herself in the position of her father, and moving deeper to see how they would, what else is there beyond the contraction of that rape? What else is there? The humanness which is there, the vulnerability which is there. He begins a process, and he healed her. She doesn't cut. It set the whole contraction free by the end of the process. Of course, there's a lot to pick up along the way of it, but that was the breakthrough. This is an amazing story because it shows how, and this was his wake-up call, because it showed how much it really is genetic. This is an adopted child. So this is a very dramatic story. If we soften it up and broaden it out, there are core atmospheres in our personhood, core attitudes, core feelings, which from a timeless space have come through the generations. The first me and other in the duality between mother, father and child. The first other is the mother. And the father, that's the first split. And it's when you really, really, really kind of ponder that split from the parents, there is a kind of pure illusion about it. Our mother is totally inside us, alive. No mother, no me at all. There is no person, you, without the mother. The mother is in you. Take the mother out of you, you are going to not exist anymore. There is no you without the mother living in you. There's no father without the son. The father, you take the son out of the father isn't the father anymore. He's not the same. The father, as you know him, is no longer existing. He can't be what he is without the son inside him. And this is all the way down to the biological. And this is so difficult to allow, partly because of these contractions. We try to make it mine because it's so vulnerable. We need that space. My mother's alive in me. Like now, my grandmother's alive in me. My grandmother's father is alive in me. If you look at what my personhood is, it's made up of all of that. There isn't a me left. There isn't a me. If you take all of the not me stuff out of me, there isn't a me anymore. I'm made entirely of stuff which is not me. Which means I utterly depend on that stuff to be me. It's my responsibility.
Listening to Georgi and watching you, I see the difficulty. I see the difficulty to accept this. And I'm not saying, really, really accept it. Or the pain which comes forward in realizing this. So in former courses we have been talking so much about the person and personhood. And trying to bring forward that you are not the person. Not the person you identify with you are. And even yesterday we asked you, do you know who you are? Do you know the person? Do you really know who you are? No. I don't know who I am. But part of how I act in the world, how I react on life, is conditioning. And a lot of this conditioning is based on beliefs. And a lot of this conditioning is pure connected with physical reactions. And around these physical reactions and these beliefs, we build stories. Why? And these stories, some of them we like and some of them we dislike. But it's really, the question is, are we these reactions? Is this what we are? Or is this something which enables us, helps us to give form towards ourselves in the world, or to have a form in the world, to have a form towards ourselves? And is it not something which is defining us? So the problem is, if we take it as something which is defining us, immediately what is created is a split between us and the world.
Can you say it again?
Immediately what is created, if we think that this collection of reactions is defining us, this is what we are, immediately there is a split between us and the world. Which is immediately created. Because a lot of these patterns are based on fear, are based on trauma, are based on misunderstandings. And the way we react to it, we take as absolute. This is the truth, this is how it is. And that makes us feel incredibly unsafe and vulnerable. It becomes a matter of life and death or death if you're right or not right.
By identifying with these collections,
Yeah.
this is what makes us react. Okay.
We immediately move into duality.
Because, okay, so you're saying, I understand all this, but we're a collection of our Our beliefs, which we build structures on, conditions we've inherited, physical reactions to these conditions based on belief systems. And you're saying that immediately, you're saying that when we think that all these conglomeration of things define me, I am this way, and I react this way, and I like this, and I don't like this, that this is already, that is creating a split between me and the world.
Yeah.
Just by simply saying, I'm somebody who likes this color, I'm somebody who always gets angry with this, I'm somebody irritated by that.
By identifying that this liking this color is defining you.
Right. So when I think...
So I like green.
Right.
And so that means if you like green as well, we are friends. If you don't like green,
That's it, okay.
it's already, you see it in primary school. We both like red. She likes green.
Okay.
You recognize what I'm talking about?
So-
It's instinctive.
So that by identifying with these definitions, I think
Yeah.
are me, that is what is creating separation.
Yeah.
Okay. And then it becomes vitally important of life and death, survival, that my way of being in the world and seeing the world is the right way.
Exactly.
Okay.
I'll give it back to you.
So we remember that our contractions are kind of forming our reality, the way in which we experience the world. It's affecting and blind spotting and narrowing our perception. It's filtering our freedom of seeing reality. It's composing our reality. Often without us even being aware that we're doing it. It's unconscious. It's from the bones, it's from the body. If he goes like this and I go like this is from the body before the mind even gets a look in controlling the situation. That I fear I'm going to be hit. I can say that afterwards. But
And I could feel so hurt that she's afraid that because I will never hit her. You see where we're moving together? Craziness. I feel responsible for her reaction, which is
illusion
attack.
is a soft order.
So wait, what did you just say about responsible for her reaction?
Her reaction, which is attack.
Right.
And I feel hurt because of her attack.
So I make
Wait, she thinks you're about to hit her, right? And so she's like this. You feel hurt that she
Really?
would think that about
Exactly.
you. Okay, and then what did you say about responsibility?
So it's like,
it awakens his abuser, his repressed abuser. That I would see him as somebody who would hit.
which I'm not allowed to. You can see the whole craziness
Okay,
which is
but
coming
you said something about
forward.
responsibility, and I need to hear this. So something about
As if I am responsible
yes.
for her reaction.
Is he responsible? Are you responsible for her reaction?
No.
Okay. This is
It's like it's the thought that, oh, maybe I did something to make her feel.
And I didn't do anything, so you don't blame me, and how could you think that I'm an abuser? I love you. How could you think so? It's so hurtful.
Okay, so that's
You have to know that I love you. You see how it's going? It's craziness.
So, but there's two things that I need to reiterate. One of them, I understand, it awakens the repressed abuser in you, got it? But also this sense of like, wow, now I'm responsible for her feeling attacked.
Exactly.
But you are not responsible for her
No.
feeling attacked. Okay. Can I have this right?
How could I be responsible for her text?
Well, no.
And we feel responsible for each other, so we get sucked into it.
Yeah, and
It's like... Back to you.
So a lot of these, especially inherited, that with this is deep person stuff. It feels very vulnerable and painful and kind of intimate. It's like we're touching the building blocks of the personality. And a lot of them is going on reflexively without our getting, the most we can say is, oh, I shouldn't have done that. It's too late. It already happened. We already had the anger. The anger already rose. We already repressed it. The whole movement already happened before the mind says, oh, something's going on. I never get angry. It's unconscious, a lot of it, until it becomes more conscious. It's buried in the bones. It screams through the bones.
It's automatic.
It moves out of the cells, through the nervous system, through this basic principle of stress and relaxation, actually. Stress, threat, fear, threat, core duality, fear and anger, survival. That's why I say it's good when things become silly, because it comes down to just such simple things: stress and depress. Choices that we make unconsciously. The system is making the choices, the body is making the choices. And of course, when the whole gas chamber is there in the sound of the German language, it's out of all proportion and rationality and humanness and respect for another German boy or whatever. There's something there which is wrong from behind. Just in the rhythm of the German language, especially if they speak with authority.
Something about that. How come I totally have that with the German shepherds and the German language, but I didn't. My parents come from Morocco generations.
Yeah.
So there were not gas chambers and concentration camps.
Or German shepherds.
There were almost, but it didn't come.
Okay,
to
so
that.
in the almost and in the exercises that we'll do in the afternoon, we'll do an exercise in the afternoon, you'll begin to get the formulas of how it works. What I can say is that absolutely and totally trust the feeling experience which is there. Trust it. And it will tell its tale.
I trust it. I just
No.
want to know how it happened.
So the answer is within.
Okay.
Yeah,
Please.
yeah. Let's look like this, but there's a difficulty to understand, and I still want to say a few words about it because it's generally important. We take it personal. We take contractions, fears personal.
Mm-hmm.
So, is it that personal? We're talking about a people who's traumatized. We're talking about families which are traumatized. Maybe it's very interpersonal. Maybe a lot of trauma is just shared and works through us. And also this has an influence.
I'll add something to the science because that's really interesting. They traumatise a bunch of rats in London. A particular species of rats. They gave them traumas. Yeah, electric shock treatment for the little.
By now, all rats. In the whole
Exactly.
world
So what did they
traumatized.
find? That this, according to this particular pattern of trauma, let's say that this time it was cherry blossom, not rose blossom, or whatever.
Okay.
This time it was rose blossom. The rats in London of this species are traumatized, by the roses. What did they find? That the same rat population
In France.
in New York, it was actually New York,
Okay, across the Atlantic.
started with the same patterns.
And here's your explanation for the Moroccan thing.
Not necessarily, because there could be a whole theme, and there will be a whole theme to do with the same thing.
So is that still genetic?
Which caused the
Because
identification.
they don't share genes. It's more about.
It seems to move through the genetic in a way. And it seems that, we see this in animals all around the world. There is a certain behavior in some animals in Russia, like sparrows are starting to eat berries, and the whole population of the world in a few years of sparrows start to eat the same berries.
The 100th monkey.
How does it
This is the
move
100th
through?
monkey.
Maybe,
How
wait,
do you not know that?
We don't see
what about traumas going by soul incarnation?
Okay, so what we're moving into with all of these questions now is where the science hasn't got yet, but it should go there, and I believe it will go there, which is the question of resonance. And the resonance, because we're talking about such a miniature scale that we're talking about vibrations of energy. We're talking about sound vibrations. So we resonate with our own species. There's a resonance. What we're really talking about with family trauma is the collapse of time. When you experience that horror of, let's stay with the gas chambers, you may not even know about it, but the horror that you experience is from the grandparents.
Who may not know about it?
You might not know
Oh,
about it, and
okay.
you're experiencing the horror of Auschwitz in feeling quality, yes? That feeling is as alive as if it's happening now. That's the nature of trauma
That's
work.
the nature of trauma.
it comes to life, but in a form where you are actually a physical body, where you're actually safe and you're not actually about to be gassed. So you're the one who gets to process that horror because you're not going to get killed by it. Okay. So should we leave it with just at the resonance layer? Because they will begin, because the quantum physics is there as well, they will begin understanding this in terms beyond time and space in terms of resonance. So the soul incarnating has a resonance, it has a karmic thread, it has a resonance, for example, to do with the learning of freedom. And that resonance will resonate with the body that it manifests through and how that body takes form. So it actually comes together.
And it's important to understand that behind every duality and every struggle in a duality, there is a quality. So the resonance on the soul level is very much with the qualities. And to learn more deeply about the qualities in duality.
Behind every
Duality, struggle in duality, there is a quality.
And the soul
Is attracted
to these particular qualities.
to these particular qualities, kind of to learn about them in duality. How they unfold in duality. How they take form in this creation.
The soul wants to learn.
Of course, yeah. There's incredible, I think, treasure in this, in kind of moving through your life.
To learn how these qualities take form in duality.
In duality, in this dual creation, in form.
So I don't want this to become too conceptual because we're really trying to give tools for working with this stuff. So I want to give some practical red flags to those deep layers of somatic trauma, inherited trauma. So it doesn't actually matter if it's from the generations because it often repeats. Often the trauma you have in this life is repeated also, you know. Everybody drowns in our family, it's the family curse, you know. And indeed, there was this incident with my child, you know, and I have this fear of water. It tends to repeat back up. So it's relevant to all trauma. But when we're working with this, we move to the somatic, it gets to a much more core level of healing trauma, in a way. So one of the first red flags is trauma is always about denial.
About what?
Denial. It never happened. Granddaddy didn't rape you. He was just taking a pee. Whatever.
Right.
It never happened. This is the traumatic statement.
And you missed the toilet.
It never happened. You're making it up. It never happened. And it's not just what people say to the traumatized, it's what the traumatized says to themselves, in a sense. They split
But
it.
some traumas are, I mean, people have accident traumas that they do acknowledge and, you know.
So I'm not going to go into all the different, because it's not really...
Well, you said trauma is always, so that's what I'm just...
The body, if the accident is a trauma on the physical level, now we're going to somatic experience, the body wasn't able to complete the thing that needed to happen when it happened.
Right.
So the body is saying it never happened, the body froze. The energy got stuck, the body needs to complete the physical cycle. So in all the shades of trauma, there is this factor of split off, get rid of, which is why the agenda to get rid of a trauma really isn't helping heal trauma. Which is why we give a contraction all the space and all the time. Because if we have this agenda to get rid of it, we're reaffirming the contraction. I want to get rid of this, to be free of this. We're splitting, split.
It's not part of my life experience.
So how does that reflect in a family structure? It never happened. So the trauma that carried by families will be in the stories which are not told, or which are only told according to one strict chronological way. The auntie that we don't talk about, that maybe we whisper she was in an insane asylum, she went crazy.
Often crazy.
The incest which was never admitted. It's in the gaps.
Into what?
It's in the gaps. in the gaps in the story of the family. It's the brother that no one knows anything about and can't remember his name. Oh, it's actually very common.
I haven't come across too many that I can't remember their
Or
name.
the story that never really made sense in its feeling. They say that this is what happened and she got pregnant and then she died, but something that doesn't make sense with that story to me. Never felt true, because we have a sense of truth. It's in us. It's alive in us, so it's directly with our sense of truth that we're moving. So mind the gaps.
Yeah.
People are telling you a story, listen to the gaps. The gaps tell the story. The second thing is, and this is very, very useful in general, and especially also in working with ourselves, is that very mechanism of a contraction which we talked about yesterday, of if we can't contain it ourselves, the resonance of the failure, for example, we throw it outside into the world. We seek it outside. We seek it in the other. So, in a very, very safe way to look at this is to look at how, and we are the best examples to ourselves to learn this, to look at, when we watch a movie, what is it in the movie which particularly gets our attention, that gets us emotionally engaged? You know, you take a movie, you know, like, name a movie.
Titanic.
Take the Titanic. So one person watches the Titanic, and what really got them crying and everything, and it was stayed with them afterwards, was a particular aspect.
No, actually, it's an actually powerful film to look at. Exactly what she's talking about. There's a lot of archetypes in there. It's a film actually used to do this kind of work. And at least we used it that way.
Yeah.
It's not about looking at the quality of the film per se.
Yeah.
Well, that's what stayed with me.
You know, I watched...
Okay, who in the film did you particularly not like?
So, for example, I watched The Unbearable Lightness of Being. It's
Sure.
a very beautiful Hungarian
Fantastic
movie.
movie.
And I watched it in London with a bunch of students at university. And the movie has a lot in it. There's a Hungarian revolution against the Soviets, there's a love story. And what I felt in the crowd of people watching the movie in Oxford was an incredible stress in the sex scenes and in the betrayal scenes.
Mhm.
That's what I experienced. It's also my genetic karma, but it's like genetic inheritance. But what really, really, really stayed with me was like, ooh, yeah, you know, he's fucking her and he's also fucking her and she's got a bowler hat on and they're naked and there's this feeling of betrayal. Yes. Then I came off to Jerusalem and the crowd in Jerusalem said, hey, let's go and watch Unbearable Lightness of Being. I've seen it, and okay, I'll come because they're nice people. So I'm going to watch the same movie again, right?
Same horror.
So I sit there
Fantastic movie.
and I experience an entirely different movie, because what was happening there was that when the tanks came in
Yes.
to Hungary, the whole Israeli crowd went into a whole stress, the whole kind of confrontation of the civilian against the tank and all of this. It was an entirely different story. The sex?
Didn't bother at
It's normal.
Betrayal, umbilical cords, men with their dicks out. But the tanks? So it was an entirely different movie. So it's not just true of movies, it's true of when we tell stories. You hear a story, you know? And people tell a lot of stories to each other all the time, but some stories stick to us, and some stories we pick up and we tell to others. Did you know she got really rejected? You know, it's like, because those areas are screaming for us for engagement. It's like the trauma is actually out here in the field of information, and we pick it up. So to what one person, the story of Gretel being laughed at in her tight red miniskirt is absolutely irrelevant, not interesting, and they will not pick up the story or think about it after it's told. And to another person is the worst nightmare, and they're going to tell everybody they know about it. And they're going to think about it, and they're going to think about it from all the different perspectives. To another person, a story of a guy who took a piss, and the whole audience heard him taking a piss, and he came out and they laughed at him, is an absolute and total horror, because he's caught in the contraction of shame. This kind of humiliation, this kind of ridiculing is the worst nightmare. So they need to tell it, and they're thinking about it, and it stays with them. But the story with the red dress and the miniskirt, who cares? You know, it's different compulsions. and how we take it from the others. And this is a really good way because you can really be scientific. You can sit and watch TV. It's safe. It's really safe when it's on TV, and look at yourself and see what's pulling, what's compelling, what's in my person, what am I carrying, what is the theme which is really moving me from the gut, really from the gut. We know somebody who is the son of somebody who lost all her brothers and sisters in the Holocaust. And she was saved by a Christian family. So she's first generation, he's second generation. And he knows he's traumatized, but he has no idea what his trauma is about. But there is this kind of, he never experienced that kind of horror at all directly, but there is this incredible kind of horror in the background all the time. And what he does, and it's like a kind of self-medication, is each night, for 2 hours, he has to sit and watch the most violent movies. They're brilliant movies, but they're full of violence and sex and death and imprisonment and authority and police chases. And then he can relax. So how is it that violent movies like that really help relax a very, very fearful person? It's exactly that movement. The violence is there. The horror is there. The brutality is there. It's in behind that screen. And I can relax, because if it's there, it's not here. Now for somebody like that, watching a movie about bunny rabbits joyfully dancing through nature isn't a pleasure at all. It's an incredible annoyance.
They don't hurt each other, shit.
There's no blood.
It's not realistic, it's not how it is.
Makes him nervous. It literally makes him nervous. You know what I'm talking about. So, the third thing about epigenetic trauma, which is really, really important to notice, it really does go into specifics. It's really age-related. That means that that person who's lived his whole life normal, and at 33, he's suddenly having panic attacks for no good reason. Nothing changed. Everything's good in his life, everything's stable, but suddenly, irrationally, he's having the most incredible panic attacks. It's worthwhile to look towards the ages that things happened in his family. What happened to his father when he was 33? What happened to his mother when they were 33? What happened to the uncle that no one ever talks about when he was 33? What happened with this age? Because it is age-related. There's a genius in the genetics. And
what if it's not your mother or father? What if it's like before that and you have no idea?
It's often like that.
Yeah.
You see the same tendency in your mother, and it's the same.
It can often go in swings, but you always get one side of the coin continuing. Otherwise it's been healed. There's not such a thing as the mad uncle cut off from everybody else, and it hasn't been, the rest of the family hasn't experienced the other side of that split and actively taken part in the cut-off. So it's like the dualities, it's like shame not looking like disgust. The theme will be there. And of course it's a little bit detective work, but the detective work is worth nothing without respecting and honouring the contraction as the authority on whatever is and listening to it. Because it will tell its own story, especially with the exercise that we'll do. It really unfolds, and the unfolding of these kind of contractions is an incredibly deep feeling of reunion. We recognise ourselves. We recognise our atmospheres, that we carry, our subtle attitudes, and then we realise they're not our own, but there's a reunion in a way with the lineage. It's very, very, very deeply relaxing on the system. So we'll have time for more questions, because part of it is really finding it out, to find it out for ourselves. And you're the authority, and beyond you being the authority, the contraction is the authority. Here. So the fourth and last thing, and then I shut up, because otherwise it's too much, is that it's reflected in those sentences in the head. Sentences like, oh, they're going to lock me up. Sentences which have a non-resonance with the rest of the thinking processes. Everybody hates me.
Nobody loves me.
This is ridiculous. Things that
stupid.
repeat, they're not random.
I'm stupid.
And they repeat also behaviorally, because often they're sentences that one of our parents would have said and that were taken up.
I'm not able to deal with life. It's all too much for me. It will all end in tears.
They're going to kill me. I'm going insane. This is not small talk, it's disguised as small talk. But when you're really listening to somebody, there is a particular emotional charge and a specificity, it really is specific to the choice of worst nightmare.
I have to do it all alone.
Do you have an emotional charge to what?
Emotional charge to these core sentences.
Ah, okay, I missed a word there.
And it's specific. You know, there's a difference between they're going to lock me up and I'm going to be abandoned, I'm going to be left all alone. There's a difference. It's specific. There's really a difference.
Different, you mean difference, meaning one person has that, one person has that?
No,
And,
no.
You have both.
There's really a whole different history and story to those two sentences,
I
which
mean-
mean this is a nightmare.
Right.
Another one. You know? Yeah?
There's a difference, of course there's a difference in the quality of the sentence and what's being said, but you mean there's a difference, meaning one is not necessarily what we're looking for?
No, they are both
Okay, that's what I mean.
unique
Got it.
threads.
Okay, no, I got that. I just thought that you were saying they're not the same, this one you don't have to pay attention.
So what's the quality of a family trauma? Beneath the head and the energy and all of this, it's, of course, every trauma is about fear. We said it's about stress, it's about fear and anger. So one way to kind of start detecting inward or towards a client is to go into this area of what is the fear in you. And often they're too ashamed to say it because all the contractions are overlaying it. What is the fear in you which, if it happened, and it must never happen, it's a fate worse than death?
Hold on.
Can you take it again?
What is your worst nightmare? What is the fear that you've carried for as long as you can remember, which can never happen?
It's not allowed to be happened. To happen, I mean.
Which, if it happened, feels like a fate worse than death. Meaning that the person can die, but if they are betrayed, it cancels out almost their existence in the feeling. That's how much it must never happen. I would rather die than. So there's, the important factor there is that it's been there for as long as you can remember, and that it's got a linkage, it's linked in, and an authority even over death. It's bigger than death. It sounds irrational, but this is really the nature of this kind of fears. I would rather die than lie.
I would rather die than what?
Lie.
Lie.
Trauma always involves death somewhere, the fear of death. So we take a break.